Today we have our second e-learning lecture. The topic today is Shiva. So today we're looking at Shiva. And here on the screen in the second slide, we have the fundamental aspects of Shiva's being. He is considered to be an absolute one who negates and transcends the earthly. Now, as we mentioned with Brahma as well as with Vishnu, all of them have a role in the creation of the universe. One of the main differences is that Shiva also has a role in the destruction of the universe, because immortality is considered to be corruption. So everything needs to be destroyed so that it can be renewed afresh in the new world. So Shiva is related to time, the end of time, to doomsday, to summoning up all of the destructive forces of the demons in order to dissolve the world. We talked about the Kalpa, the various eras. So he is the one who, at the end of the current era, will help to dissolve the earthly planet and create the blank slate from which Brahma, as well as Vishnu and himself, will create the new world. So here we see that being a creator as well as a destroyer can be beautiful, it can be ugly, evil, and hideous. We also will discuss today the issue of sexuality, because creation involves the mating of the male and female principle. Can one being actually create the universe in and of itself, or does it need that other principle in order to complete it and in order to move the creative force forward? Now, Shiva has three faces, and this again plays into the notion of the male and female and the androgyny, the ability to create unto himself. So there are three faces. Again, we'll see examples of all these issues. The absolute, which is the God, but he also has these male and female personifications. So as we had with Brahma and Vishnu, Shiva has a series of names of the beneficent, the destructive, the vagrant, mendicant, the great Lord, the Lord of dancers, the God with the moon in his hair, the supporter of the Ganges. So these suggest his position at the bottom and the top as a mendicant, a very austere hermit, as well as of the God Almighty. So beneficent, he is that being who blesses humanity and looks after its day-to-day existence, giving boons and blessings, but he's also a destroyer. The mendicant, as I just mentioned, is the ascetic, the hermit. It is the man who goes around begging all the time. The vagrant, the man without an abode, the man without a home, who obviously leaves the bounds of social responsibility and material possessions and relationships and searches by himself for that path to enlightenment. So he is like a hero of the loner, of the hermit, of the austere ones, as well as the God Almighty in the heavenly zone. So the next slide we've seen before. It is from the Indus Valley civilization. It's one of the seals, and it represents a figure in a yoga posture, seated on a chair. The two arms are out to his sides. His face is upright. He has a fancy hat. We mentioned two aspects of the sculpture before. The first is the face. We see eyes and a nose very abstractly represented facing forward. That is the face of the Absolute. We also mentioned that if you look to the right, over his left shoulder, you can barely see the edge of a nose and a mouth, And you have a little bit of the same over his right shoulder to our left, a little bit of a nose and a little bit of a mouth. So this is, whether this is Shiva or not, it is hard to say, but it represents a three-faced figure, very similar to what we're dealing with. The other element that we mentioned before is the linga. The linga plays a very important role in the narrative of Shiva. We see that as this yogi is seated, that we have the penis, we have the testicles, the penis is erect, and as we mentioned, it is called the linga, or sometimes lingam, L-I-N-G-A-M, and that is the cosmic metaphorical concept of the male sexual member. It represents male creative power, male creative energy. And if Shiva is going to be the one responsible for the potency that is necessary for generating that energy to create the world anew, obviously the erect sexual member represents that potency for procreation, that potency for creation. So with slide number 4, it's a more obvious, clear representation of the three faces. So the one that's facing forward is calm, cool, collected. It represents Shiva, contemplative, inward meditating. The eyes are closed. He's aloof. He is distant. On his right shoulder, which is to our left, is the male face. So the male face is on his right shoulder. And the way you can distinguish it quite often, there's a little bit of a mustache. The jawline and the chin is a little more prominent. And on Shiva's left shoulder, again, our right side, is the feminine face. And there we have a smoother jawline, a softer cheek line, and obviously, no mustache, but softer, gentler features than we have on the other side. So facing forward is the cosmic, aloof, celestial, omnipotent, omniscient, supreme Godhead, whereas the creative principles are always with him. The creative principles are always a part of his being, and they exist on both of his shoulders at all times. So what are the emblems of Shiva? First, I want to discuss when he is represented as the ascetic, as the hermit, who is wandering about the surface of earth. He is dressed very simply. He does not have any jewelry. As it says here with the first bullet, he has matted hair. Matted hair, the contemporary corollary would be dreadlocks. So that is what we mean by matted hair. This thick hair, long, it's not braided, but these long strands. So thick matted hair like dreadlocks. Quite often he has the image of the female goddess of the river, goddess Ganges. And this goes to a whole story of Ganges, the female goddess, because every river has a god or a goddess, like in almost all early religions. And Ganges was sitting in heaven, but if she was going to come down to earth and create the river Ganges, the impact of her landing on planet Earth would have been much too dramatic. The Earth may not have survived. So Shiva said, okay, land on my head, and that'll cushion your blow as you then move down upon the earth. So quite often we have that image of the Ganges River within his head. Wearing flowers, very poor jewelry, shall we say. Quite often he's holding a skull, because that obviously again represents poverty, and an ascetic is constantly contemplating mortality. And then the crescent moon is quite often in his hair as well. The objects that are mostly carried in Shiva's hands when he is the omnipotent, omniscient God. He holds a rosary, which we also saw sometimes with representation of Vishnu and Brahma. The trident, we've seen that weapon before with Vishnu. Sometimes he is represented as the linga, the lingam, so Lingam, so you will see it both ways. His vehicle, remember Vahana is the term for vehicle, his vehicle is Nandi. Nandi is a bull. So remember we said Brahma was a goose, Vishnu was transported upon that griffin-type Garuda character, and Shiva is transported on a bull. He's got a family. Shiva has a family of 4. He's married. We'll talk about the family towards the end of today's lecture. His wife is Parvati, and he's got 2 children, Skanda, also known as Kartikeya, and Ganesha. So here we see Shiva with 2 adorants. Shiva, in this case, does not have much jewelry. He has the matted hair. When he is represented as the mendicant, as the hermit, but also in his divine royal status, we see this braid. Sometimes it looks like a snake. It is so thick and rounded that goes across his shoulder, across his torso to the other side. It's like a snake winding around his body. This is related to the way hermits dress, and quite often they have these bands or sashes or cords that go across their body. But as you see in this case, he doesn't have the wealth and trappings of royalty. It's a rather simple representation of clothing and accessories. A more royal representation with a very high crown. Sometimes within that crown, we'll see the sickle moon. Sometimes we will see a little goddess in there. Again, that would be River Ganges. He's got the halo behind, which was typical of many of these gods, but he's got the big earrings, he's got the big necklace, he's got the bracelets around his arms, around his wrists, and then that serpentine, snake-like cord that goes across from his left shoulder across his torso to his right side. So it is this beautiful curving diagonal line that serves as an additional accessory. The face is very aloof, contemplative, meditative, looking forward, expressionless, as he is again in the yoga posture. Around him, various people adoring him. Now, because Shiva has the power to destroy, he has that sense of fearsomeness. It's debatable whether people love him or people fear him. Do you pray to him because you don't want to be on his bad side? Or do you pray to him, the bhakti yoga, do you pray to him because you want him to give you a blessing? Unlike Vishnu, who assumed various avatars as he came to transmit his knowledge, to work with humanity, to show humanity good versus evil, the proper path versus a heretical path, Shiva doesn't have similar stories. So when he comes on earth, everyone is worried as to whether it's time for destruction, what his motives may be. So the people surrounding him are a combination of animals. a combination of angels, a combination of humans, rich, poor. We have some in the middle zone, on the left side and the far right side, dressed like hermits. So this slide represents the diversity of humanity that are in awe of his supreme power. Is a more contemporary representation, so it's clearer to see the distinctions in the accessories and his props. Three faces. The one facing to our left is the male, facing to our right is the female. In this case, it's very hard to distinguish the masculine versus the feminine characteristics. In his right hand, you should be able to recognize by now the various accessories. At the very top, we have the circle, which is the discus. In the middle arm, there are 6 arms total. In the middle arm, there looks to be like a little cup. In the lower right arm, there we have the water pot. On his left side, our right, at the top, we have the conch shell. In the middle, we have the trident. And the arm moving downward, we have the rosary. So many of the same accessories, well, all the same accessories that we saw with Vishnu. But how do you recognize it's Shiva? Because of the Vahana, because of the vehicle. We have the representation of Nandi the bull right behind him. So that is, in and of itself, a reason to say that this is a representation of Shiva. So number 9 is a representation of Nandi. And as we mentioned with Vishnu, generally outside a temple dedicated to Vishnu, you'll have Garuda right outside the front door. We made the contemporary metaphor that when Vishnu goes in a temple, because if the temple's dedicated to Vishnu, we believe that his spirit is actually alive within that building. So he parked his car in the parking lot outside. So again, when it's a temple dedicated to Shiva, we would expect to have a statue of Nandi, as the bull is parked outside the temple, who delivered him to the temple and will take him to his next stop. With all these vahanas, the animal is a combination of abstraction and naturalism. In comparison to Vishnu's Garuda, Nandi the bull looks more like a bull. It's not an anthropomorphic figure, hybrid figure, half human, half bird. The bull looks like a bull. He's extremely easy to identify. Obviously, as the bull of Shiva, in this representation, he has a tremendous amount of jewelry, including a headband with jewels and almost earrings and a lot of necklaces. This is a very large statue. So again, it represents the adoration and the honor that is given to the gods, Vahanas. So slide number 10 is another representation of Nandi, and you can see located directly outside of a temple. In this case, it is made out of brass, and as we saw in other forms of ritual in Buddhism, many of these statues are adored, and they are given clothing. Here we have a garland of flowers. He has a turban on his head. So these animals, these vahanas, are actually worshipped because they are very close assistants or very close to the god himself. So slide number 11 introduces Shiva in one of his most famous roles, Shiva as Nataraja. We've had Nagaraja in many of our Buddhist representation. Raja, we mentioned, is like a king, like a Maharaja. Nataraja, Nata is the dance. So this is Shiva as the king of the dance. So why is the dance important? Because it is a demonstration. We talked about tapas and rasa. So with these Hindu gods, it's very important to demonstrate their high level of energy, dynamism, power. So we mentioned that tapas and rasa. Tapas was that heat, that power, that surge of force, that electrical impulse that is important, that kinetic energy that's important for moving the universe and the cycles forward. It's a little, as I said, aggressive, heated, powerful, fearful, like fire, ignition, whereas rasa is more of the softer side of power and energy. It's more of the joy and the happiness. But you need the two. You need that dynamic energy, electrical impulse, that fearsome kinetic power, but you also need that nurturing well-being to balance it out. So it is a demonstration of Shiva's, and we wrote it, supranormal powers. You know, if we say super, S-U-P-E-R, normal powers, it just means you're better than the average guy. It's just normal, but a little farther up. It is normal to a more ideal level, but supranormal is you're far, far above whatever could be conceived normal on planet Earth. So while he is in the dance, he's in a trance, he's in an ecstasy, he experiences the divine, he merges into the divine essence. As we have seen him in the yoga posture, his face is very contemplative, meditative. He's in himself. He is not conscious of the outside world. He is summoning all of these tremendous powers into that creative or destructive act. So it either can be, his dance could be an act of creation, where he arouses all of these dormant energies, you know, with that kinetic power. He gets them moving, gets them going. He arouses all of these latent powers to affect, whether it is change or something much more hyperbolic than that. And it's also, the dance can be an act of destruction, as it summons up all of these energies that become so great that the earth just crumbles. That heat and that energy, that tapas, leads to chaos and annihilation. So slide number 12 is Shiva in the midst of the dance. So it's very obvious when that is the narrative being represented. You see the legs are bent at the knees. We have a sense of asymmetry in the hip line, in the legs. The feet, here we have one that is up on the ball of the foot, the other's on the heel. It's a transient pose. It's a momentary pose. And then many arms, and the arms are twirling in the air. So it gives a sense of whipping up the air currents, creating a sense of velocity, creating this frenzied moment of kinetic power as he is churning up all the latent energies, as we already described. Now let's look at the hair for a second. It's really not a crown. It's like all of this thick hair piled on top of each other. That's more like that dreadlock. So when you have the dance, the hair becomes a little frenzied. The hair may become very messy. We'll have some examples of that. But here we have a good example of him engaging in that tremendous activity and that sense of frenzied, asymmetrical, unbalanced, transient pose. When we look at what's at the bottom, on the left of the scene, there we have Nandi. That's Nandi the bull in the bottom left-hand corner of the sculpture. And on the right, we have one of his children, who we'll get to later. So in slide number 13, there he is dancing again. So you'll always be able to recognize Shiva as the king of the dance, as the lord of the dance, Nataraja. The asymmetry, we could even call this the body of the three bends, the phrase that we used before that is very typical of indigenous Indian art. The head is angled, the torso goes the other way, the legs are going in opposite directions. The arms are spinning, twirling, twisting, bending in a variety of different directions. Some of the hands, as in the previous example, are holding like the trident and the conch shell and the water pot, maybe a rosary. So many of those same accessories are represented. From the first part of the course, here it's very easy to see the summer clothing. There's the skirt, there's the heavy belt. But because he's dancing, the skirt has to be higher in order to allow his legs to move very freely. Slide number 14, even in a very small representation as a part of a decoration of a temple, we would clearly identify this as Shiva, as Nataraja. You see the same leg position, you see the twirling arms, the face is rather calm, and again, the sense of frenzied activity. Slide number 15 is the type of representation that you would most commonly see in various stores or art galleries. These are bronze sculptures that were made around starting around the year 1000, mostly in southern India, and represent Shiva in this circle of fire. So again, the tapas, the heat, the energy, the aggression, the power is represented by, those are little flames that are projecting around the outside frame of Shiva. So the frame is supposed to be like the halo we've seen before, but it is a ring of fire that again represents that power. His hair, that's his hair, the dreadlocks, spinning in the air, flying through the air with a sense of abandon. You actually see on the left, our left, a couple angels, a couple figures actually in that hair. And then his arms are moving up and down, spinning around. He's got 4 arms in this example. And the legs, only one is firmly on the ground, the other one is suspended in the air. Again, giving a sense of absolute momentary action. Now, we've discussed previously muscles and anatomy. We're not mentioning for each of these images because it is the same type of conversation that we had with Buddhist sculpture from early India. We don't have much of a representation of the skeletal and muscular structures of the body. The bodies are relatively smooth. Many of these examples do have prana, as we've mentioned before. Now, in these examples, Shiva is in a very aggressive posture. If you are dancing strongly enough to create or destroy the universe, if you are dancing wildly enough that you are generating so much heat, so much energy that the halo's on fire, wouldn't you expect to see muscles in those legs, muscles in those arms? In this example, if we look at the legs, we do have good kneecaps. Now we look at the feet, we do see some veins. You look at the individual toes, they have the bends of the bones within. And there are actually some very good details within the feet. But where's the thigh muscle? Where's the calf muscle? What about the biceps and the triceps? If he's twisting and turning, I should expect to see much more abdominal definition within that torso. And then the face is absolutely calm. Nothing is disturbing that very calm and meditative facial expression. Again, in some of the more iconic images of Shiva, you'll have the three faces, but when you have him in another narrative, you only have the one face that is being represented. So in slide 16, it's just another example. One thing we did mention is we have the flaming halo of fire, but he's standing in both cases upon a demon. So again, it's about Shiva's relationship to those forces of corruption that exist in the universe, and that he doesn't want the world, he doesn't want humanity become corrupted at the end of time. So therefore, destruction saves the world from its complete degradation and self-annihilation. So therefore, the demon represents that corruptive element within Earth, within the planet, within the human soul. So therefore, whether it is the dance of creation or the dance of destruction, all aspects of evil need to be kept at bay. So the demon underfoot is always under control of these cosmic gods. So slide 17 is a painted representation of Shiva Nataraja. Again, we have the demon underfoot. We have, snakes. We have figures watching on, princely, a whole host of figures. It looks more like a heavenly scene, but they are, again, this absolute frenzy of activity. Everything is swirling. Everything is breaking down into its cosmic units as the world is going to be dissolved. After the world is dissolved, it'll be some time before it's reconstituted. The world needs a little bit of a rest between destruction and beginning again. Okay, Shiva. Now, when we discussed Brahma came out of that lotus. We saw representations. The lotus stem came out of the belly button of Vishnu, and there Brahma attains a level of consciousness and creates from within himself. Brahma is neuter. He is asexual. He's an absolute that is beyond any differentiations, male, female. He is beyond everything that exists on planet Earth. And that is, again, another reason why Brahma is considered to be very remote from human existence and not very much engaged with humanity. Shiva, on the other hand, is, as we said before, male creative energy in its most fundamental form. He is, we mentioned before, creation destruction, and he includes the yin and the yang. He is above the yin and the yang. He is the yin at times. He's the yang at times. He is all of the parts necessary to move the universe forward. So we mentioned the linga. Again, sometimes it's written as a lingam. So issues of growth and expansion. Okay, so I want to tell a little story. This is the story of the origin of the lingam. It opens with a narrative we've already discussed. Vishnu is lying on the cosmic ocean. Everything is black. The water's black. The sky is black. It's the cosmic void. No universe, only water and the starless night of the lifeless interval between dissolution and creation. So the world doesn't exist. All is absolute darkness. In the infinite ocean, all the seeds, all the potentialities of subsequent evolution is in a dormant state of undifferentiation. Vishnu is floating, as we've already seen him, upon the substance of his own essence. Remember, we saw Vishnu floating on the cosmic ocean on the serpent mattress. He's a large giant lying on the liquid surface, glowing in his own divine beauty. But something new happens. Vishnu perceives all of a sudden there's another bright object, and it's approaching him with a swiftness, shining with the brilliance of the sun. It's Brahma. So all of a sudden, Vishnu becomes conscious of Brahma. Brahma's coming towards him. Smiling, Brahma says to Vishnu, "Who are you? How did you get here? Where did you come from? What are you doing here? I'm the one who creates everything from myself." Vishnu said, "Oh no, you're wrong. I am the one who creates and destroys everything. I have created and destroyed the earth many, many times." So the two of them, who don't seem to be conscious of each other in this whole narrative of Hinduism, they start to argue, quarrel as to who creates and who destroys. And while they're arguing in this absolute darkness, there's a third glowing thing all of a sudden appearing. It starts rising out of the black ocean. And it is this tall, vertical projectile, tall, vertical thing crowned at the top. It's burning. Rapidly, it grew into infinite space. It keeps growing taller and taller and taller. The two gods, Vishnu and Brahma, stop talking and are staring in amazement at this apparition. They didn't know where it began, back down in the waters, or where it was going, far, far, far into the black sky. So Brahma says to Vishnu, "You go down into the waters, I'll go upward. Let's see where it begins and where it's going to end." So you remember that Vishnu had that avatar of being that wild boar. And remember, in that avatar as the boar, he dived into the cosmic ocean in order to save the earth. And he grabbed onto the earth and lifted it back up onto the surface of the water. So Vishnu, as the boar, can swim. And Brahma, because he's got the goose, he can fly. So on his gander, he can fly through the sky all the way to see where this long thing, flaming object, is going to end. So they go in opposite directions, on and on. They travel, but never reach the beginning or the end. The boar descends, Brahma flies, and this object just keeps growing and growing and growing. And then, as we see in the slide here, then all of a sudden, this object bursts open, looks like an elevator door opening, and there is Shiva, the force supreme of the universe. Brahma and Vishnu, so overwhelmed by this visual, bow before him in adoration. And Shiva says he's the origin of the universe, and actually he's the one that created the two of them. So he pronounced himself as the super Shiva, the supra-normal. Okay? So it is the linga, it is the cosmic phallus, the cosmic penis that simply grows and grows and grows with its tremendous male tapas, energy, heat, power, and that becomes the embodiment of Shiva. So in this image, left and right, we have people praying to the linga as a representation of Shiva. So in slide number 20, again, we see the elevator doors on the linga opening, and there we have Shiva standing to greet us. It's curious in this example, when you look at the bottom of the sculpture, that's supposed to be Vishnu in his boar avatar, diving into the waters deep beneath to see where the linga originated. And at the very top, that's supposed to be Brahma on his goose, although it's hard to see, on his gander, as he is flying up into the sky to see where the linga ends. So it's a cosmic phallus, cosmic penis that just infinitely grows. That's a more contemporary image, and that looks more like a phallus, male sexuality. But again, that is the embodiment of that supranormal masculine power. So there are many different representations. And when you go to India and even some other countries that have people who follow Hinduism, the linga is a very common emblem. Sometimes it'll have a face on it, many times it will not have a face on it. But simply that vertical rounded form is sufficient to represent the male power. That is Shiva with the dreadlocks. So it is the penis with the face of Shiva with the dreadlocks that are flowing down on both sides of his head down to his shoulders. Where does it stand? You see that the linga is standing in a circle. And off to the far right in this slide, you have like a little drainage passageway. We'll get to that in a second. There we have the linga with multiple faces, the male face on his right shoulder, the female face on his left shoulder. So you can still have that symbolism. The same thing again with the multiple faces. Now the face forward towards us, towards the camera, is more fearsome, more aggressive, because again, it is the sheer tapas of that creative surge of power. So here we have slide 26 is obviously a contemporary object placed outdoors. So there we have the linga. So it becomes even more abstract as this phallic symbol. And you see it is again in that circle with this channel that leads out to one side. So you have the linga, but obviously it cannot create without the feminine counterpart. So the feminine counterpart is called the yoni, Y-O-N-I, yoni. So here, the penis is in the uterus. So that is supposed to be a representation of the vagina. So you have the circular form, and there we have the opening to the vagina. And you have these swimmers within this object that are coming in. It's a little snake-like. So again, it represents the movement of energies and powers between the male and the female principle. So in slide 27, it is the type of object people would have within their home. So again, it is the vagina with the linga inside. This very primal metaphor of male and female coupled together to create a sense of intercourse, a sense of harmony, a sense of unity, the two in one. We'll get to it further today, but it also becomes a very important metaphor for the design of Hindu temples, Hindu architecture. Okay, so now his wife. We have seen the linga in the yoni. That is the pure abstract metaphor for male principle and female principle. Now, if Shiva is the god of creator, well, they all think they're creating. If Shiva is the god of creation, then he must have male and female within him. He must have both. But obviously, he needs to separate his male from his female in order to have two separate entities that can then copulate. So here we see the name of his wife, Shiva Shakti. A Shakti is your female essence, your female counterpart. So Shiva's female counterpart, his yin and yang, his female essence, his wife is Parvati. So when one divides into two, when Shiva is the cosmic creator divides into two, his male principle and his female principle, that obviously it becomes a fragmented whole. And in order for sex, in order for fertility, in order for creation, somehow those two have to become one again. And that's what we just saw with the linga and the yoni. The two fit in very well together, that reintegration that again helps with growth. So we have duality of creation destruction. So as Shiva can be creation destruction, Parvati, his Shakti, his female essence, also has a role in the positive, creative, and the destructive, negative narratives, because she actually is him. Parvati's father, again, there are many different interpretations, narratives. Her father is considered to be the king of the mountains, and she has her own vahana. Her vahana is a lion or panther, so a feline, okay? So slide 29 is the husband and wife. So again, he has the same three bends, the same graceful elegance, and his wife has that same elegance. They look like mirror images. His body curves to our left, her body curves to our right, because they're one and the same. They all came from the same creative entity. Slide number 30, many of these images are the same, husband and wife. They even genetically look alike. But again, summer garments, no bone and muscle, the same accessories and clothing we've had before. Again, it's the indigenous Indian facial type. Many of these smaller scale bronze tabletop sculptures do not have a lot of sharp detail when it comes to anatomical forms. So many of the facial features are very simplified and geometric. Again, the eyes are on the surface. There is no eye socket. There's very little differentiation of hills and valleys on the face. The lips are on the surface. The nose is the parrot's beak. Many of the elements that we've seen before. So in slide 31, we can have Parvati by herself. So there she is, the position of royal ease that we're very familiar with, the summer garments. It is very much the Indian indigenous ideal of beauty for the feminine body, like the yakshis, the voluptuous breasts, very narrow, youthful waistline, and the slightly wider hips. You may see a little bit of fleshiness in the stomach area or a little differentiation of maybe a rib cage, but as we said previously, there is actually very little attention to the skeletal and muscular structures of the body. Even as you look at the body proportions, obviously the head and neck are very large compared to the shoulder line. And actually the narrowness of the torso, the rib cage and waist, way too narrow considering the thickness of the thighs and the thickness of the legs. So for slide 32, there she is standing. So the body of the three bends. And perhaps you would not recognize this statue immediately as being of Parvati because she has no distinguishing characteristics. How do you recognize it as the couple? Because they're on Nandi. So husband and wife are seated on the bull. So just the presence of the bull identifies this as Shiva, and if Shiva has his wife, that is Parvati. So it's the happy married couple on their vehicle, getting in the car, waiting to go somewhere. And in the four corners of this fabric, we have representations of angels. You can see their wings. Parvati and Shiva live on a mountain and they travel quite a bit as they look over the world. Slide number 34, you'll get the hang of it. There we have husband and wife seated on the bull. In many of these cases, there's a differentiation of scale between husband and wife. We saw that with Vishnu and Lakshmi, his wife. So here, Parvati is very small in comparison to her husband. So again, symbolic scale, but it really doesn't demean her role or her status within the marriage. And down at the bottom of the scene, underneath Nandi, you have their two children, who we'll get to shortly. Is a nice painting. There they are. You recognize it as Shiva and Parvati because of the bull. Shiva has his hair down, his hair is dreadlocks. We can see the crescent moon in his hair. This is Shiva as the ascetic, as the mendicant, as the one who wanders, the holy man who wanders. And there would be his wife standing next to him. So number 36, there they are on their mountaintop. Remember, Parvati's father is the king of the mountains, so Shiva and Parvati live in the mountains. So Mount Kailasa is their home. It is considered to be somewhere up north. If it's in the Himalayas, if it's in Kashmir, we don't know. Here we have them in a position of royalese because this is their court. This is their royal court. And underneath them, we have a demon. You see him very angry, twirling about, many arms, many faces. And there's a story that continually demons want to undermine not only the authority of the gods, but also want to undermine the stability of the universe. So these demons exist underground and they're responsible for earthquakes. So they create these seismic tremors in order to shake humanity, to destroy the planet. So all Shiva has to do is put down his right foot, slams down his leg, and the earth compresses and the demons are destroyed. So whenever you see husband and wife at the top in royalese, look at how Parvati reclines there. So casual, so relaxed. They're celestial court. They're sitting on rock because they're on a mountaintop. And then within a little hole, little cave, you have this twirling demon with so many arms and so many heads. That again is demons undermining through seismic tremors the order and harmony of the universe. Because Shiva can be creator, he can be destroyer, he can be beneficent, he can be kindly, he can be aggressive, he can do tapas, he can do rasa, so can his wife, because she actually is him. So we have many representations of Shiva and his wife in their destructive avatars, if we want to say it that way, or destructive manifestations. So on the right is the husband, 4 arms, skull necklace, the crescent moon in his hair, his dreadlocks are flying, he's got his other little like figures becoming demonic in the background. There he is. On the left, that would be his wife in her more destructive mindset, her destructive manifestation with snakes, twirling, snakes twining around her body, and they're dancing. So we said, king of the dance, lord of the dance, Nataraja, is to create and to destroy. But he has to go into this manifestation to summon up a sufficient amount of energy to actually get the job done. So his wife accompanies him quite often in this cosmic dance. And this is a more folk art type of interpretation of Shiva and his wife as Nataraja, taking on these more dynamic, aggressive, dark cosmic manifestations in order to destroy the earth. In this case, Shiva is the one on the left, and Vishnu is the one, Shiva's on the left, and Parvati is on the right. In slide number 40, let's go a little further into the issue of sexuality and gender. So Shiva is the figure who is both. And in all mythologies, in all religions, in all origination narratives, we have the androgyny. And the androgyny is the body that contains both the female and the male principles, the female and the male, yin and the yang, the cosmic duality, the two halves that are primordially attached in one body. So there's some interesting bullet points here. It's the ideal and the real relationship, but it is barren because the androgyny, if the male and the female is within one body, you can't have sex with yourself. You cannot procreate. It's more of an abstract, ideal, philosophical position that the body contains that yin and the yang. It's a theoretical, philosophical position, but it is not an active sexuality. So it is barren. So the two halves have to separate into two separate bodies in order to reunite. So you have the androgyny has to break apart. Now, in Genesis, so in the Judeo-Christian tradition, God made man in his own image. He saw Adam, and then in God's divine wisdom had to create Eve. But Eve came from within Adam's body. God took the rib out of Adam's body and from that made Eve. So did Adam already have that female principle within his body? And then that female principle was taken out and made into a separate secondary entity? So in all of these religions, in all these belief systems, there is a sense of a primordial oneness that later becomes two in order to propagate the earth or to propagate the human species. Once the body is separated, then you can have one embodying the lingam, the male principle, the male procreative principle, and the other representing the yoni, the female procreative principle. So the two then, it's like one body breaks into two, so then it can connect together again. So it can integrate together again in order to give birth and to be fertile. But the idea of the androgyny and the humor of it is androgyny is a union of male and female. It is the happy marriage because you can't divorce yourself. And you can't, there's no animosity. It is a happy balance between male and female principles. When the two principles divide into two separate bodies, then you're going to have the issue of two personalities and warring factions and issues of marriage. So how do we recognize God, who is the androgyny, the body that is both? The face is the same, the hair is the same, the body of the three bends is the same. There's an active principle here, the body is twisting and turning, but the breasts are different. On one side, you have a female breast, very voluptuous, very three-dimensional, and on the other side, you have no breast. So most often, remember we said Vishnu has the male principle on his right shoulder and the female principle on his left shoulder. So his left breast is female, his right breast is male, like a pectoral. So on our right, we see a fully fleshy female breast. So this is the body that is both. And you may even want to say that the hip line is different. The side that has the female breast has a more curvaceous, rounded hip, whereas on the side that has the flatter male pectoral muscle does not have a curvaceous, rounded hip. So the hip line is not symmetrical either. So in slide number 42 is another example. So you can see on his left side, you have a fully developed three-dimensional feminine breast and a rounder hip line on that side. And on his right side, flatter pectoral muscle and a straighter hip line that goes all the way down from the abdomen to the thigh and the knee. You may even say that even the legs have a slightly different definition, a little more muscle on the masculine leg than on the female leg. So this is he who is both male and female. So the Holy Family, they live on Mount Kailasa, as I mentioned. It's a mountain up in the north of India or in the Himalayas, Kashmir or the Himalayas. And Parvati's father was the king of the mountains. They have two children. Child number one is Ganesha. He's got the elephant head, and he is his own vehicle. His vahana is a rat. Child number two is Skanda, sometimes called Kartikeya. He's got 7 heads, and his vahana is a peacock. So these are the two children. So slide number 44 is the Holy Family. Now, living up in northern India or the Himalayas, the landscape is always very lush and very green. So as we said in many of these narratives, the gods live in beautiful environments that are very different from the toils and troubles of ordinary humanity. So the verdant greenery, the grasses, the flowers underfoot, the trees on the mountains, the beautiful sunrises and sunsets represent the lila, the beautiful play, the beautiful joy that we mentioned is a part of Krishna's narrative as well. So Shiva is there in the clothing of one of the ascetics. He's got the moon in his hair. He's got the dreadlocks. And you see he's got his 7-headed child in his arm. There we have Parvati on the bull Nandi and with her child Ganesha in her arms. So this is the family of 4, mother, father, and 2 children as they're out for a stroll. So here we have slide 45, another representation of the Holy Family. So there are many such images. Mother, father, Skanda, and Ganesha seated on a lotus throne in this image of quiet and calm. There is Parvati in the center, So just like her husband, she can have multiple arms as well, and she may be holding some of the same accessories. And there we have her two children at the bottom, Ganesha and Skanda. Most times Skanda is represented with the 7 heads, but not always. It's cute. The two children have the body of the 3 bends, very lyrical and very elegant. So slide number 47, let's look at the two children. So the first child is Ganesha, and this is a cute family portrait, mother, father, and child. Now, we mentioned that Shiva has to break into 2, divide into 2, in order then to reintegrate and produce, be creative. Obviously, a couple like this would have fertility issues. So no matter how much sex the couple has, Parvati was unable to conceive. She cried, she was very upset about her infertility. Shiva took tremendous pity on her. If this is the couple that represents the linga and the yoni, supreme creativity, why couldn't they have children? So she was crying, crying, crying. Shiva takes pity on her. There are obviously many variations to the story, but he takes a piece of fabric and bounds it up into like a little ball, well, actually like in the shape of an infant in swaddling clothing, and hands to Parvati this bundle of fabric. She takes it and it's like, what is this? So he says, oh, it's like a child. Well, obviously she was extremely upset at that. Very, very upset because is he mocking her? Is he making fun of her, giving her fabric? So she started to look down at it, and all of a sudden this inanimate bundle of fabric was starting to move. All of a sudden, it is as if it is coming alive, that there actually is a baby there. So she starts crying tears of joy. It's a wonderful thing to behold. She now has a baby. When women give birth, they're in the hospital. I'm talking about contemporary life, not Parvati. They're in the hospital. They're holding on, they're given the baby by the midwife or the nurse or the doctor. They're holding the baby very tight. There's a tremendous amount of joy and happiness. Then the father comes over. And all that anxiety, you can see it on the face of the mother. Do I trust my husband with this baby? You know, the husband wants to hold it. And the mother's like, oh, I'm not sure about that. So according to one of the versions of the story, Parvati hands the little baby to Shiva, and he drops it. He drops the baby, and the head falls off. And the head rolls down Mankala, so the head keeps rolling, 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 and it's somewhere on planet Earth. Obviously, Parvati is hysterical. Shiva has to run after it to try to get the head back. So he is unable to find the head, but they look at the baby's body, and they have to find another head that would fit into that hole based on the angle, based on the dimensions. So Shiva, all he can find is a baby elephant head. So he takes the baby elephant head, puts it in the body, and the body comes alive. So that's Ganesha. It's a baby body with the baby elephant head. So that's the family portrait. They take care, you know, it's a loving family. You know, they do, mother and father do represent the best of family virtues. And here we have Parvati very tenderly looking into Ganesha's eyes. You see what's in Ganesha's hand? It's his vahana, his little rat. You know, Ganesha is holding a lotus flower. We have The other objects, he's got 4 arms, he's got a lotus flower, he has, looks like a little box, he has like a little trident weapon in one hand and his vahana in the other. So slide 49, there we have Ganesha, and he's got like a mace. In this object, he has like a mace in one hand. So what is Ganesha's role? Ganesha, because he's cute, he's adorable, people like him. People very often bhakti yoga. They pray to him. They do puja. They revere him. Ganesha became similar in Christianity to Saint Christopher. He is the one who oversees voyages. Like if you're going on a trip, if you're going out of town, if you're about to embark on a dangerous mission, a dangerous task, Ganesha is always there. And you can always say a little prayer to Ganesha that he'll give you a good trip, good travels. You'll be well taken care of. So he's a very accessible figure, but obviously very easy to identify. So in number 50, there he's doing a dance. So he does a dance just like his daddy, just like his mother. So again, prana, that softness. He's always represented as a child, so it's a very childlike, chubby body. He doesn't ever grow up, so he doesn't get like a human body of a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. He remains that childlike, adorable figure. Number 51, there we have a little more definition to the face. So he's holding like the conch shell. He's holding many of the same elements, doing a little dance. There he is again. This one has a little more mass. You can see the fluctuations of the hills and valleys across his skull, over his head. A little bit of eyes set within eye sockets, the roundness of the nose area, the trunk area as it comes out of the face. You have some hills and valleys for the pectoral region, and then this round, full belly, because again, it's more of a childlike body. It has a more puffiness, more softness, a rounder stomach, and a fuller form, like a toddler. There he is, again, doing a little bit of a dance. There he is, seated on a lotus throne with a rosary, lotus, trident, various weapons, because again, he is there to protect you, look over you when you have day-to-day troubles. There he is, seated on a little throne altar. And there you see beneath him is his rat. So the rat is carved into his throne. Again, it is parked nearby to transport him to his next venue. So what about the other child? So we've already seen that, Parvati cannot have a child by normal means. Maybe it's the symbolism of incest, of reuniting with the one of which you were originally a part. But Skanda is another unusual case. Now, there was one day the earth was trembling and it was shaking so hard that it is as if the whole planet was becoming compressed. The people on earth believed that the world was being agitated and compressed because of Shiva and Parvati's amorous endeavors. So humans and gods went to Brahma and they said, God of gods, husband of Lakshmi, savior of everyone, protect us. We've come to you for refuge, for our minds are disturbed by fear. The breath of the triple world is being compressed solid, and we do not know the cause. The whole world, moving and still, all sages and gods, is agitated. So Brahma didn't know what to do. They went to Vishnu. They don't know what to do. So they all went to Mount Kailasa to see what was Shiva doing. So they all go up to Mount Kailasa and they knock on the door. Again, there are various versions of this story as well. Shiva and Parvati were engaged in sex. And you can imagine what that sex is like. This is tapas in its pure form. This is supranormal. This is everything to the nth degree. They knock on the door. Shiva hears them, but because he's so afraid of his wife, he doesn't want to stop. Because if it's coitus interruptus, if he just says, oh, somebody's at the door, I have to go now, she's going to get very, very mad. Vishnu, the Brahma, the gods, the humans, everyone is outside his door. Everybody is knocking. They're screaming, Shiva, Shiva, Supreme Lord, what are you doing inside of there? We've come for refuge. The world is falling apart. Eventually, Shiva comes to the door. Like, what's going on? God of gods, great God, mercy, what has happened? Have pity on us. And Shiva feels sorry, feels a sense of pity, feels bad for them, bad for the destruction and their worry and their agitation. But as he is standing there, it gets a little graphic. His semen fluid starts to drip on the thresholds of the palace. What is Shiva's semen like? You can just imagine. The heat, the energy, the volatility. It is so hot that they don't know what to do. That'll be another danger to the planet. It's going to start burning a hole right through the entire creation. So they decide that Agni, the god of the fire, you take it. You're hot enough because the semen is pure tapas. It's pure electrical energy. Fire, you can hold his semen because you are fire. You can endure very high temperatures. So Agni takes the semen, but even he cannot hold on to it. It's even too hot for him. So they have to find a place to put it. They decide to put it into a lake, into the waters. One day, women, the wives of the sages, the wives of the 7 sages, come to bathe in that lake. They always do. There's nothing very unusual about it. It was a cold day, and for some reason that lake felt nice and warm. Well, it was because of the heated power, the tapas, of Shiva's semen. So, of course, these women all get pregnant. When they go home, they start to have fevers. Their temperatures rise tremendously because their bodies have taken in semen, Shiva's semen. It's almost as if they're going to die from the tremendous temperature, from that power within. They are mortals. They are unable to hold it. So the gods decide to take these embryos as zygotes and put them all together into one woman who will give her life to give birth to this child. So therefore, the child, coming from all these different mothers, these different wombs, ends up having 7 heads. So that's how we get Skanda Kartikeya with the 7 heads. Some people refer to him as the god of war, but like Ganesha, he remains diminutive, smaller in scale, looking as a child. You have the family of 4 again. So look very carefully. So we got Shiva on the right as the austere hermit mendicant. On the left, we have his wife Parvati holding little baby Ganesha. Behind Parvati, we have the panther lion. So that's her vehicle. In the bottom left, we have the bull, Nandi, Shiva's vehicle. Then we have the 7-headed child, Kartikeya Skanda. And on the right bottom is the peacock, which is his vehicle. And right above the peacock, between the peacock and Shiva, is the rat, although it doesn't look very much like a rat. Behind them is Mount Kailasa. It is a very green, lush landscape, flowering vines coming down from the trees. It's a cool landscape where water and greenery are plentiful. And the next slide, family again. Family values, peaceful and calm, always nurturing their children. And here, as the sun goes down and the skies become dark, there they are, ready to go to sleep for the night. Even the Vahanas are all asleep. So that concludes our discussion of Shiva and his family. So the next lecture will be a discussion of the goddess. We discussed many of those issues today. We'll discuss a little bit more of them and some of the most prominent goddesses in Hinduism. Thank you.